What's going on, everybody? Brenden Schaeffer back here with another fantasy football mock draft on Sleeper. We're winding down July, which means we're really starting to get into the time of year where mock drafting gets ramped up pretty hard. We're all trying to prepare for the upcoming fantasy football season as best we can, so want to invite you to click that subscribe button, join the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel, where we'll be running mock drafts all throughout August. You'll have the chance to participate in some of them as we get going. But for now, we're running a 12-team PPR mock against the CPU here on Sleeper, and I wanted to start getting into specific strategies from specific draft slots. As people start to kind of find out where they may be picking in their upcoming drafts, I thought that would be a useful way to go about it. We're going to start off with drafting from the turn today, the number 12 spot. Definitely a difficult place to be on draft day in most years, but I actually think there's a way to use it to your advantage this season with the way I expect the board to set up. That's how I see it anyway going into this mock. We'll see if it ends up playing out that way or not, but we'll go ahead and claim the number 12 spot right here. Like I said, drafting against the computer today. So let's just go ahead and kick this draft off and see how it goes. We've got the music going in the background. Jamar Chase off the board. Surprised to see Justin Jefferson not go till number 4, but Travis Kelce there at 3. Travis Kelce is obviously going to be a fixture in the first round. You get some more receivers, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Bijan Robinson going rather early, Diggs, Barkley, and Lamb before it heads into our pick. So I mentioned the turn being a spot that doesn't necessarily scare me. You see the roster options here. We've got 2 wide receivers and 2 flex. This is a full-point PPR setting, and so in that setting, I don't mind stacking a couple of wide receivers right out of the gate. One guy that I am really starting to find myself pick up a lot of shares in mock drafts is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Really excited about what that Lions offense, in particular the passing game with Jared Goff, could look like this year. I think they're going to throw the ball quite a bit, even with the addition of the running backs that they brought in, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I think those guys are both good pass catchers as well. And the Lions, of course, didn't have a very good defense last year. So if that trend doesn't change all that much for 2023, you could see Jared Goff having to throw it quite a bit, and they've got the receiving talent to make that work, I think. I'm looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown pretty hard. Other options, A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams. Garrett Wilson came up today, actually, with an ankle injury in practice, but I'm going to assume for now that that's nothing that will impact him for the week 1 of the regular season. I'm taking Amon-Ra St. Brown with one of these 2 picks. I know that for sure, so I'll go ahead and lock that in. Checking out the other positions on the board. Too early for going quarterback for the way that I want to build this thing out. Jonathan Taylor on the preseason pup, probably nothing to worry about. Nick Chubb really is the running back that would interest me here. I expect him to have a huge workload with no Kareem Hunt in Cleveland anymore. That offense with a full season of Deshaun Watson should be pretty good. I think they're going to want to run the ball a lot. I expect a lot out of Nick Chubb. I think this might be a career year for him. But as I look at the way I expect drafts to go, and I scroll down a little further, when you get to a certain spot in the draft, which for me maybe happens right around the end of Tyler Lockett here, and we'll see what round Lockett ends up going. But after that, I look at some of these wide receivers, guys like Christian Kirk, Mike Evans, Deontay Johnson. Then you've got some young receivers in Smith and Jigba, Pickens, and Addison, who I like their upside. Traylon Burks, upside. Jahan Dotson, even upside. But a lot less certainty. It feels like there's a real drop-off in that kind of 70s range at wide receiver, whereas when I look at running backs, I like these guys. It's not that I don't like these guys, but like Breece Hall, where he's being drafted, crazy to me. On the preseason pup, I don't think he's going to be drafted in this area when the end of August arrives and people are really doing their drafts. Good running backs in this range for sure, but then it gets to this spot in the 40s and 50s where I'm thinking, man, I don't really have a lot of interest in any of these guys at cost. But as you get lower, it suddenly opens up again where guys like Javonte Williams, David Montgomery, James Cook, Isaiah Pacheco, if healthy, Alvin Kamara, risky with the suspension potential. I just really like the running backs in the later rounds. So my plan is to load up on wide receivers early. You can hardly go wrong with the guys that you choose in this range, but I don't think people realize how good A.J. Brown was last year. I don't know if he'll replicate that, but you can't really go wrong with stacking him with Amon-Ra St. Brown to kick off a draft. So that's what we're going to do here. Patrick Mahomes, the first quarterback off the board. Josh Allen also going in the second. if I'm drafting early for videos where I'm drafting around this range, that Mark Andrews in the early third is going to be tempting. Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow go. We don't care about that. We just like the quarterbacks going early because we're not ready to jump in on those waters yet. Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, good wide receivers coming off the board. Devontae Smith going here, we don't mind because we did take A.J. Brown, and we're not trying to necessarily double up on Eagles this early in the proceedings. I maybe wish I would have had some other wide receivers available here, but Deebo Samuel and Calvin Ridley, I feel like, are two guys that are great values at this range in the draft. When you compare them to like the Metcalfs, who's going to have to still deal with Lockett and now Smith and Jigba in that Seattle offense. Keenan Allen just has been rock solid throughout his career, but he's getting up there in age. And as I mentioned, Devontae Smith, if I had gone maybe Devontae Adams here, I would be kicking myself or Team 9 for the fact that Smith goes a couple picks before me because I'd love Devontae Smith as a wide receiver 3, but that's not possible here. But Deebo Samuel is elite when he's on the field. And I think his role in that San Francisco offense is going to remain. It may be a little bit of concern about the idea that you have CMC and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle. Is it a too many mouths to feed sort of situation? But that offense we know is extremely, extremely elite. On the running back side, I am tempted by Jahmyr Gibbs, but I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't want to double up on two Lions this early, even though I like the offense. And I'm actually a little bit wary of Kenneth Walker at this range because I think the split between he and Zach Charbonnet is going to be a lot closer than people think, and Charbonnet is way down the board. We'd love to get Charbonnet at cost here at 104 in the rank on Sleeper relative to Walker. If I had gone a little differently, let's say I start with A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams instead of taking Amon-Ra, I'm probably going Gibbs here. But I'm going to take Deebo Samuel because I feel like as a wide receiver 3, I can bake in some of that risk of he's injured, he's not on the field enough, and all those sorts of things. But ultimately, I am in such great shape with him as my third wide receiver in a PPR. He's going to be force-fed targets. He'll get little, catches out of the backfield probably if they continue to use him in that type of role. Love Deebo Samuel at cost, right? It's not like we're trying to pay up in an early second-round pick like he probably would have been last year. He's at the end of the third, which we love. We like T.J. Hawkinson, but not at the price. So we're not looking tight end here. Calvin Ridley, if this clock expires and I really haven't settled upon anything I like better, Calvin Ridley for sure a consideration for me. Other wide receivers in this range that I'm looking at, well, I think the Browns offense is better. I'm not heavy on Cooper. I think DeAndre Hopkins landed in a tough spot for just general volume when you still have an offense that's historically been run heavy, although they do have a new OC in Tennessee. I like McLaurin, but he's always a tough guy to pull the trigger on in this range in that offense that you just don't expect to be elite with the quarterback play. DJ Moore is very enticing to me as the potential to be kind of this year's A.J. Brown, where he goes into a new offense that helps a young quarterback emerge. And DJ Moore is a talented receiver. I like Christian Watson a lot as well, but if I'm comparing Moore and Watson, I'm looking at the wide receiver quarterback connection, and I feel like I trust Justin Fields more than I do Jordan Love. Jerry Jeudy is, I think, going to be the number one there. Ridley is interesting, man. It just really depends. Like, I was a guy that drafted a lot of Calvin Ridley back before his suspension and really liked him. But it was kind of tough for me to really get on board week to week just watching their games. But I think with a good quarterback that he's got now, it's going to be really compelling. I'm going to go Calvin Ridley here over DJ Moore. That's the choice and the consideration that I'm making. And if you look at my roster too, checking out bye weeks, it's a disaster, which I find myself in this spot on these week 9 buys kind of a lot. But that's not anything to really worry about in the draft. So we're not going to spend a lot of time focusing on that here. As we watch this draft board tick, tick, tick by, we talk about some of the names. Christian Watson and DJ Moore, guys that we were thinking about, go a round and a half later. So that's something to keep in mind if I am in the middle of a draft, to say the idea I could get one of these guys in the mid-fifth. Maybe I like that draft spot. It's a little more enticing. Looking at more names, we lose more quarterbacks. I think Trevor Lawrence is about the last quarterback that's interesting, and it would be tempting to stack him with Calvin Ridley, to be honest. But we've got 4 wide receivers. You can do that. In a PPR league, I have no problem with just loading up on stud wide receivers because we're getting to that spot in the draft where I talked about the running backs really opening up for me. You know, guys like Gibbs, And Mixon, I think, is going to be locked into volume. Kenneth Walker and Aaron Jones are good picks at that cost. I don't think I was wanting to do it in the third round necessarily on Walker, but you could see definitely the benefit of that. But guys like Dobbins, Madison, Sanders, and Cook, that fifth round, just not enticing to me. And so I don't mind being back here where all of those picks have been used up, and I don't really have to worry about, them taking guys that I would rather have access to, as I misclick here on the draft board. 50 seconds left. Let's look at some of the running backs we'd be considering here. DeAndre Swift, yes, you'd be doubling up on Eagles, but that's probably a decent offense to double up on. James Conner is interesting because I think he's locked into volume, but it's for a bad team. Could they eventually decide to go with a younger model to try him out at the end of the year? Cam Akers has the injury concerns. Alvin Kamara is really interesting to me. And we've got two picks here. Javonte Williams, to me, is a guy that we might be leaving this round with, and it's not going to be considered a good value at the 6.1, but I don't think he gets all the way back to my next selection. Here's where that line is. So, you know what? If I'm committed to wanting to take Javonte Williams, and I'll talk about a little bit why, I'm going to pick him now just because I'm on the turn. You go back to back. Even if it would be considered a reach, if you've got a guy in mind that you know you want to leave with one of these two picks, just draft him with the earlier pick to kind of give yourself some time. And you can use the whole clock the way I just did as well to kind of think through and talk through your options. I don't understand why we're seeing Breece Hall up here at the 3.4 and Javonte Williams 2.5 rounds later. When Breece is on the preseason pup, Javonte Williams is not. They both had similar injuries. And Javonte Williams is potentially going to be healthy for week one. In an offense with Sean Payton, yeah, maybe we don't know with a new head coach how much they're prioritizing him. They brought in Samaje Perine. But I am a believer and always have been in the talent of Javonte Williams. So in the end of the fifth round, to have him as my my running back one, when I've got these wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley, I am in love with that. And I could add DeAndre Swift, who I think is a talented player and landed in a perfect situation. I'm not over the moon with DeAndre Swift, but I think he's a really good situation. It's crazy because I wouldn't mind having James Cook as my running back two either. I think when we start doing these mocks where I'm in the middle, picking 5, 6, or 7, you're going to see me scoop up some guys in this range like James Cook, like David Montgomery, like maybe even a Pacheco or an Antonio Gibson as a really last resort in like the 7th maybe, because I think he's going to be a PPR guy. It's all about drafting to the settings that you're playing. But for me, I feel like pretty good about any of these options. It's the risk of Alvin Kamara, the suspension being a potential thing here. That scares me a little bit. I'm not going to probably end up with Tyler Lockett. I really like Tyler Lockett, but from this spot in the draft, it's just not going to be possible. DeAndre Swift or Alvin Kamara, man, I'm going to go with Kamara in this instance. I don't think you could really go wrong with either. And, of course, with Javonte added another Week 9 bye. So, generally, those are going to be things you're thinking out a little more closely when you get into the real drafts. But for now, I just can't. I'm just looking at the talent and trying to figure out here in late July, who do I like? Who do I want to be sitting there on the board when I'm up to pick when my real draft comes into play? That's kind of the exercises we're going through right now. We look at the board over the last 2 rounds. Things move quick whenever you are on the turn. Some tight ends go. We don't care about that. Wide receivers in this range, like, not to say any of these guys are bad players, but I don't think I'm going to be targeting Mike Evans, Mike Williams, Addison, Smith and Jigba, Deontay, Christian Kirk, Michael Pittman at cost. Maybe Brandon Ayuk and Tyler Lockett. Those are the 2 guys where if I'm in the middle here, those are very large considerations for me. But otherwise, I mean, I think by loading up on wide receiver early, you look at the running backs that went off the board. Yeah, some guys we like, but look who's still here. Like, we're taking James Cook almost assuredly with this pick. We're into the spot now where we're talking about building up our bench. Tight end and quarterback still need to be filled out. We've got a lot of risk in our running back room. But where we got these guys, man, a couple of years ago, these guys would have been like 2nd, 3rd round picks. Alvin Kamara would have been in the 1st. He'll probably be suspended. Kamara will. But I'm thinking it's about 4 games. I don't think it's going to be anything significant. And you look at Kamara, 28 years old. Yeah, he's maybe a guy that starts to age out. Kamara's head coach unsure on possible suspension. You're going to have more clarity on Alvin Kamara by the time your real home league rolls around. But right now, getting him in the 6th, I'm all about shooting for upside when I know that I have locked in 4 really solid wide receivers. Yes, there's some injury risk baked into guys like Ridley and Deebo Samuel. I feel like Amon-Ra and A.J. Brown are 2 guys that are just going to be horses this season. But because we're locked in and we're just looking to fill out a bench, we're weaker at wide receiver or we're weaker at running back than wide receiver. I don't think there's any doubt that I'm picking James Cook right here. Just some news that came out today about James Cook and the Bills being excited about him being a 3-down back and the potential there. Easy selection for me at this stage of the draft. Now we feel like we're a little more balanced out because in PPR, I'm always going to want to use wide receivers in the flex spots. And all I need right now is Javonte, Alvin Kamara, and James Cook. I need 2 of those 3 guys on a weekly basis to be healthy, be capable. Yes, this is a risky group. And so we're probably still looking to plug in at running back another guy that we can count on, that if these guys are suspended or Javonte's still injured, that we can plug into our starting lineup and get something. Get 8 to 10 points in a PPR setting. And I feel like there are 2 guys on the board to which that applies, and one of them might have more upside than the other. The first one is Antonio Gibson. I feel like he's got a higher floor than Zach Charbonnet, but the ceiling argument for Charbonnet is tremendous if something would go poorly or horribly wrong injury-wise for Kenneth Walker. I would believe that Charbonnet would be instantly like a top 6 to 8 running back because Seattle and Pete Carroll love to run the football. So in this range, I'm kind of glossing over Penny because I don't think for PPR he's as big of a... Actually, it applies to all 3 of these guys. Brian Robinson, Jamal Williams, Rashad Penny. They're more workhorse running backs on the ground between the tackles than they are going to get out and catch the ball. I'm not really looking Samaje Perine because I don't need to use such a valuable pick in the early 8th on a handcuff for Javonte Williams. That's going to limit my upside for my roster. I like Khalil Herbert for sure. I'm hoping maybe he makes it back to me. Back to that 9-10 turn. Devon Achane is another guy that I'd love to see make back to me because if that happens, and if I go one of these 2 PPR backs right here, I've already got 4, and I feel really good. I've got to go running back, and we'll talk about some of those wide receivers potentially. I am going to go Charbonnet over Antonio Gibson because I'm shooting for upside on this spot in my bench. Some of the wide receivers that are going off the board, again, it doesn't really bother me. I feel like I'm so loaded at wide receiver. Michael Thomas, Kadarius Toney with his injury, Juju. Gabe Davis is the one guy that I'd love to have as my wide receiver 5. Zay Flowers is another. So those are 2 that hurt because if those guys, either of them make it to here, I'm scooping them up instantly without a question. But we look at what does fall to me, and Courtland Sutton's sitting here. And I recognize that we do have a stake already in that Denver offense, but I feel like you're buying these Denver guys much lower than you did year 1 of Russell Wilson when the hype was so tremendous and we were all let down so significantly in that Nathaniel Hackett run team, which Sean Payton came out today and said Nathaniel Hackett may have done the worst coaching job in NFL history last year with the Broncos. So if you don't think that Sean Payton's going to have them in a much better position, then we don't see the board the same. And you're getting discounts on these guys. It's not, Javonte Williams, end of the 5th, there's no way he stays there if the hype continues the way I believe it will for Javonte Williams. I'll love Javonte anywhere in the 5th by the time late August rolls around. I hate to double up on teams when I can avoid it, but we're talking about looking for upside on the bench. Courtland Sutton's probably not the number 1 in Denver. It could very well be Jerry Jeudy. But if those guys are even like somewhere in the same vicinity, which I think they are talent-wise and maybe even opportunity-wise, why is there such a stark difference in the draft price? I feel like we're leaving Courtland Sutton for dead. If I can get him at the end of the 9th, I don't need to talk about it anymore. I draft him. He's my wide receiver 5. He's not needed in my lineup in most situations. It's possible that I'd need him if there are some injuries to my wide receiver core, but I just can't believe the value there. I don't think that could even be real. We don't talk a lot about tight end and quarterback, do we? And there's a reason for that. I feel like it just doesn't matter. I like Sam Laporta. I'll let you know now we're targeting him for the end of the draft. And we'll even potentially look to double stack it with Jared Goff. But we've got, I could probably do that. I could probably wait another round. And if I can't, look, there are teams, this is Sleeper, this is CPU we're drafting against. they might all draft backup quarterbacks. What do I care? We'll go Russell Wilson then to stack with Cortland Sutton as kind of a low-end stack. We'll go Matthew Stafford. He's going to be completely fine if he's healthy. He's connected to Cooper Kupp, guys. I don't need to worry about quarterback unless I see a guy like Lawrence falling into the 7th, or I see Justin Herbert falling into the mid-6th, or Justin Fields into the late 5th. Like, where I expect people to be goo-goo for quarterbacks this year, I'm going to zig while they zag, I think. I'm just going to wait on the position like I always do. And I continue to say this to people who listen to my content, which would love to have you guys subscribe to this channel, by the way, if you're enjoying this video. Quarterback and tight end, I feel like, are the two easiest positions to trade for when you get into the season and you have a robust lineup at running back and wide receiver, because everybody else loses their guys to injury. They prioritize QB and tight end too early, and when they lose an RB or a wide receiver to injury, which we're susceptible to as well, it could happen to us, but look what we have on the bench to fill in. I mean, we feel really good about that. We didn't spend much time talking about this, did we? We're taking Devon Achane. Achane or Herbert are the two options. The reason I go Devon Achane is because I think he's got more upside to be a true wide receiver one if the opportunity goes his way. Khalil Herbert, I think he's going to be splitting the backfield. They drafted Roschon Johnson in the 4th. They signed Deontay Foreman. Herbert is the most talented RB in that team, I think. But Achane, with the way he could be used by Mike McDaniel in that offense, if he doesn't get used that way, we cut him, right? We put him back on waivers and let somebody else take the shot and stash him. But I feel like Achane could easily turn into a top 10 to 15 running back as a rookie if he just gets the opportunity. He fits very well to Miami's system. So it's a no-brainer. You're talking about upside on your bench. You don't want to stash guys on your bench that you'll have to wonder whether or not you should let them string you along all season. You just want to draft guys that can turn into studs, and then you trade them. You trade Cortland Sutton and Devon Achane because Sutton is a top 28 wide receiver, and Achane is the starter in Miami. You trade those two guys for a stud quarterback or a stud tight end, and then you have just an absolutely loaded lineup. That is the path to fantasy success. It doesn't work every year. Sometimes the injury bug just gets so bad that you can't pull off those types of 2-for-1 trades. And people say, oh, you can't just bank on hoping to, screw people over on 2-for-1 trades. It really isn't that way. They have a need. The other fantasy owner usually has a need because they don't have enough running backs and wide receivers. They prioritized it differently in the draft. This is the way. We're going to load up on running backs, load up on wide receivers, trust the injury luck to go our way a little bit, and then we'll be able to trade into some really interesting quarterbacks and tight ends. So we're going to probably save quarterback and tight end until the very bitter end, although Sam Laporta is top on the tight end list, and if I don't get him, I am kind of a little bit annoyed. Jared Goff did go, however, so I do kind of lose the stack there. But I don't really care. Let's see real quick if there's anything else we're looking at. Kendre Miller is interesting to me, particularly because of the Alvin Kamara situation. This is late enough to where I am willing to kind of grab a backup at a position to handcuff. And I'm going to take the shot on Kendre Miller. Again, we might know, and I do get one more pick here, so this is good. I forgot we were on the turn. We do get another shot. Kendre Miller might not be the backup to Alvin Kamara, but if he is, it could be like a Kareem Hunt situation where he was a third-round pick for the Chiefs. He ends up being the starter week 1, and he just emerges and is fantastic. You might say, Brenden, you've got a lot of rookie running backs. Second-year running back, rookie running back, rookie running back, rookie running back on your bench. Exactly. That's the way it should be. Because even let's say only one of these three guys, Charbonnet, Achane, and Miller, end up turning into fantasy viable. No problem. We'll drop the other two because week 1 always provides waiver opportunities. You've got to make sure you're cycling your bench in an appropriate way to make sure to take advantage of these things. Okay, at wide receiver, we've only got 5 of them, which is fine because we're still loaded with our first 4, and Sutton is number 5. If I were going to pick another one, which, by the way, never draft a defense, never draft a kicker on draft day. Pick those guys up Saturday before week 1 Sunday. Draft more rookies. Hold them on your bench if the platform allows it, because you never know. Training camp injuries, preseason injuries can happen. If I were taking a wide receiver here, I would go Sky Moore or Rashee Rice. I'm taking a shot on a Chief because I feel like that's where the upside is. But because I did mention that Laporta was head and shoulders above for me at these bargain bin tight ends, I mean, it says Laporta's already climbed the depth chart, is in line to be the top tight end beginning the regular season. We're in on the offense. We regret that we didn't get to stack it with Jared Goff and Amon-Ra, but that's not really necessary. We're going to take Sam Laporta here and not think twice about it. The Chiefs wide receivers are the only other thing I'd be wishing I had. In this draft, I didn't put defense or kicker in, so it's not really even an option. I'm going to leave with a quarterback. You don't have to. I've done drafts before where I don't. But we see Sky Moore and Rashee Rice. Those are the two guys we'd have been looking at. Like, why are you taking Zay Jones this late? That's a guy that every week you're going to go, should I start him? Should I flex him? Should I drop him? Same thing with Mostert. I get with Mostert. He could easily just turn into the starter in Miami just like A-Chain. Like Ezekiel Elliott, I guess I can understand that. Think about it, though, with your late-round picks. Kyler Murray is a great pick here if your league has an IR spot. I don't mind that at all. But because we don't have a quarterback at all and we're looking to find a starter for week one, Matthew Stafford is my extreme lean. But Brock Purdy is interesting as well because you're mixing him with Deebo Samuel. And it seems like Brock Purdy is healthy and ready to go. Cleared for camp. He'll be on a pitch count. He's their starter. I love Trey Lance. It ain't happening for Trey Lance. Free Trey Lance, trade Trey Lance. I would love to see the Niners give him a chance to play, and it's going to be by getting him on another team. But if I'm looking at the upside of Stafford or Purdy, I think Purdy's got more upside just because there's probably more passing touchdowns, more touchdowns in general in San Francisco than there are with the Rams this year. So I literally don't mind going Brock Purdy and saying, like, Matthew Stafford didn't get drafted in this league. I think Matthew Stafford is easily a top 15 quarterback if he's healthy. And sometimes it's just replacement level value. Get your 15 to 18 points at QB can avoid you from tanking a week. And there are guys out here that aren't going to do that every week. Like Justin Fields is going to have a down week. Justin Herbert had plenty of them last year. Deshaun Watson is going to have weeks where he scores in the single digits, just the same as guys on this waiver wire at quarterback like Matthew Stafford are. So I feel really good about this draft, actually. I said coming into it I would have loved to be on the turn this year because I think there's ways to manipulate it. And this went about as perfectly as it could. These are exactly the types of targets I'm looking for on my bench when I get into my real draft. Rookies, young players, or guys with talent that we're buying low on Cortland Sutton. James Cook, I think in the late 7th. Watch the list of players here and see in a month from now where they are in ADP. Because I'm telling you, the majority of them are going to go up. I think we have identified some really interesting targets, and I am feeling pretty good about this if it's my team going into the year. You have some stacks when you have Brock Purdy and Deebo Samuel set up in one of the best offenses in football. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. We've got investment in a good passing offense in Detroit. We're taking guys who are risky like Javonte Williams and Alvin Kamara. But think about this. Kamara gets suspended for 4 or 6 games. Javonte Williams starts the season a little slow because of injury. Assume that you're making the playoffs. On draft day, assume that you're making the fantasy playoffs. A fully healthy Javonte Williams and a fully active Alvin Kamara in November, December is extremely valuable if history repeats and those guys are the guys that we think they are. So from a talent perspective, we really feel good about this draft. Let me know, though, in the comment section below. How do you feel about this draft? If you were on the turn, would you approach it similarly, or what would you do differently? Because we went a little bit obscure with 4 wide receivers in a row. We saw Team 7 do the same thing. But I think even from drafting later, we have a much better foursome than they do. Kupp, I would take over St. Brown, but not by a ton. St. Brown could be the Kupp of the Detroit Lions. We have seen him operate in similar ways this past season. Garrett Wilson versus A.J. Brown, that's a toss-up, but I think ADP would show you Brown. Metcalf versus Deebo, I think I prefer Deebo, actually. And I do prefer Ridley over McLaurin. So Christian Watson, they went 5 wide receivers, so they're pretty stacked on Team 7. But let me know what you think. We forego the positions of tight end and quarterback, but we could end up with diamonds in the rough at those spots. And we have enough rookie running backs that if even one of them hits and we get through the injury and suspension situations with Javonte Williams and Alvin Kamara, suddenly we have a robust lineup at wide receiver, and we have enough to cover us at running back on a week-to-week basis to where we can trade into some more powerful tight ends and quarterbacks. Let me know if you think this is a viable strategy. Comment below with your thoughts and the type of content you'd like to see on this channel moving forward. Make sure you hit that subscribe button before you get out of here. Lots of fantasy football content coming to the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel all year long. Hit like, hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel. Peace.